All right, so picking up where we left off, we didn't do much. We saw how we could log to the terminal, or the console, you could think about it as in JavaScript. We saw how we could declare a variable with the let keyword, and how we can either initialize it immediately or initialize it later. All of that works. Um, the next thing I wanted to share with you is constants, or like immutable values. So that's looks a little bit different in JavaScript. The concept's the same, and that's one thing you'll find as you like explore more and more different computer languages, programming languages, is that the concepts are all the same. There's just like slightly different syntax. The good news with that is like that means it's relatively easy to pick up new languages when you understand the concepts. The downside is like it's still frustrating, but I get confused between different languages like all the time. Um, so for constants, meaning they have an immutable value, um, good news. Uh, we're going to use the keyword const. I think that makes a lot of sense. Constant sport is short for constant. Um, it's great. Um, it is similar to the final keyword in Java, right? So in Java, we use final. And that's like, this is the final value for this variable. Like I get where Java is coming from as well. I just like const. Const is what you use in C, so that's where it comes from for JavaScript. Um, with a const variable, it may be initialized at the same time as declaration, or later. We can't do the later thing in Java, but in JavaScript we can. Conventions are the same as what we use in Java. So use all uppercase letters for constants. Well, I guess it's a little bit different. Yeah. Well, it's a little more subtle, I guess. Use all uppercase letters for constants assigned to literals. A reminder of what a literal is. A literal is like a hard-coded value. 7 is an integer literal. Quote Schmidt is a literal string. Um, those are literals. In JavaScript, the convention is to use camel case. Camel case is how we normally define our variables in Java, where they start with a lowercase letter, but each word then gets an uppercase letter. So we use camel case for constants assigned to expressions. So that's like a subtlety. Is that like that important? No. A lot of these things I share with you is so that when you're reading through JavaScript code, you're aware of the conventions, because that makes it easier to understand the intention of whoever wrote that code. So um, that's why I share a lot of stuff. So let's do an example. We could declare a constant variable. So we start with the const keyword. I'm going to use all uppercase and call it host name. This is like we're going to connect to a given computer, but the computer we're connecting to in this example is localhost. And we'll talk more about localhost later. Localhost is like a special host name that means this computer, the one on which the code is running. In your case, the one sitting immediately in front of you. Well, I guess a little bit to your left or right, depending on where the desktop is. That's what localhost means. And then we can log it. We can say console.log hostname. So that's how we do constants. One more thing I'll share with you, because you'll see it, we won't use it. And in fact, if you try to use it, you'll get a warning with our linter. One of the VS Code extensions we installed was ESLint. A linter is a tool that helps you write better code by checking it as you type it. And it warns you about things that aren't necessarily like compiler errors. It's not a compiler, but more of a checker for things like, you really shouldn't do it this way. Like, that's like the old way of doing it. You should do it this new way, or other suggestions. They're always good to follow, almost always good to follow, because often they might lead to bugs, or at least lead to like misunderstandings. So this is an old thing. We will not use this keyword, but there is a var keyword that you might see in other code. And you can think of var is short for variable. Const is short for constants, and var is short for variable. So var is an older way of declaring variables. Declaring variables. It is similar to local variables defined at the top of a method in Java. Well, that was a lot, and I can't even spell it. Variables. Similar to local variables defined at the top of a method in Java, like that's how the scoping works. Scoping isn't as clear as when we use the let keyword, I think. So this is rarely used in modern JavaScript. So again, I'm sharing this with you so you are familiar with it, not that we are going to use this. So I could say var y equals 11, and then console.log y. And I expected my linter to give me a warning, and it's not. So I'll have to look into that. Maybe it's because I've disabled some things at the top. We'll see. I'll check on that. But normally when we type JavaScript code, it's going to be like, you should use let or const, or let in this case, but or const, I guess, because we're not changing it. All right. That's how we declare variables. So key things we care about here, let, const, that's what our key takeaways are. So now let's explore primitive types. And what primitive types look like in JavaScript. And again, we'll keep highlighting how primitive types in JavaScript, where they're similar, where they're the same as Java and where they're different as Java. Our first primitive type we care about is a number. A number represents both integer and floating point values. So there's a difference, right? In Java, we have int and long and double and float. Those all represent numbers, but we have different types for integer versus floating point, and we have different types for different number of bits for those integer and floating point values. In JavaScript, we just have number. Think of number as similar to a double in Java. It's almost like we just always use doubles is kind of how you can think about it. So as an example, I could say things like let a equal 7. So a has just become implicitly a has become of type number. But I can also like change its value later and say 3.14, and that's fine because like 7 and 3.14 are both just numbers in JavaScript. Whereas in Java, like one would be an int and one would be a double. And here's the cool thing. You can do console.log, and I can say type of A. That's neat. So type of is a keyword, and the variable that follows it, or the expression that follows it, what will be returned from that is not like the value of A, but rather what's the type of A. So to show you what that looks like, if I right-click on intro.js and choose run code to run this JavaScript, I can see where it prints out number. So the type of variable A is a number. Cool. Next type. This is a big difference. The next type we're going to focus on in JavaScript is a string. So in JavaScript, a string is a primitive type in JavaScript. In Java, string is not a primitive type, right? String is just another class. But in JavaScript, it's a primitive type. Literals, meaning like hard-coded values, literals are enclosed in single or double quotes. You can use either. There's another difference from Java. In Java, we always use double quotes. In Java, single quoted single characters are of type char, not of type string, or are not automatically converted or not created as string literals. There's also something cool in JavaScript where we can use backticks. Backticks are the key above the tab key on your keyboard. Is that true? Yep. Below escape, above tab, there's the backtick character. If you hit shift and press it, you get the tilde. But backticks enable template strings. And we're going to see an example of what I mean by that. They're super convenient. So despite this being a primitive, it is still very similar to Java's string class. So let's write some examples so we can refer to this later. I can say A equals hello. And notice that we can dynamically change the type of a variable. So if we do console.log type of A was up here a number, right? We assigned 7 to it. We assigned 3.14 to it. We logged its type. It said number. Now we've assigned the string to it. If we were trying to do this in Java, it'd be like, sorry, A is of type double. You can't assign a reference to a string. But in JavaScript, it's like, sounds great. And we can see now the type of A has changed to a string. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I'm a little bit more of a fan of some more strongly typed languages. I think a lot of times this can lead to like confusion and bugs, but I don't know, not up to us. So just be cognizant of the fact that you can, whether you intend to or not, change the types of variables. All right, let's look at this backtick thing for template strings. This is cool. I can say let b equals, I can type that backtick character, and then I can embed with a $ curly bracket expression. I can put something inside of the curly brackets, and then I can have more string stuff here. This is called expression embedding. The expression starts with a $ and an open curly brace and ends with a closed curly brace. Need a little more screen space here. This is super convenient and can lead to some very concise code. It can also lead to some very confusing code. But the way this is handled by the JavaScript interpreter is that when it sees the backticks, it's like, this isn't a normal string literal. I need to evaluate the embedded expressions first. It looks for $ open curly bracket. It takes whatever in the curly bracket pairs and evaluates that first. It runs that as JavaScript code. Here I just did 3 plus 4, but we could like call functions. We could do whatever JavaScript code we want inside those curly braces. Okay. The result of evaluating that expression is then converted to a string and then put in with the rest of the string. In this case, like you can think of it as like concatenated with world. In Java, we tend to do this as two different parts. We'd have our expression, and then we'd use the plus symbol to do concatenation with the rest of the string. All right, let's log this. So we can say console.log b. And then again, if we run it, we can see that it says 7 world. How what? How do you write what? How am I running it? So I am in the I'm in the default tab button here, which is your Explorer tab, and then I right click on the file name, and the very first option will be run code. Only if you install the recommended extensions when you first open the project. If not, you'll have to like. So we went through this yesterday, but just real quickly, if you open up .vs Code folder and click on extensions, these are all the recommended extensions. You'll kind of have to compare these names to the extensions that show up when you click on the extension button in your toolbar, because there'll be other recommended extensions you don't need. Like I don't want any of these. But the ones that are corresponding to these are the ones you need. Specifically, unless you install this extension, you can't run your JavaScript code. And I, of course, can help you later too. Next type. What's our next type? Boolean. A Boolean type. Good news. It's similar to Java's Boolean type. So we can say things like A equals true. Again, we just changed the type of A. Console.log type of A. And when we run that, it's going to print out Boolean. So number, string is a little different, but not that different. Number, string, Boolean, that covers the basics. And all of those have pretty close relationships with Java, even though in Java, a string is a class and not a primitive type. We have two more types I want to focus on. And this is where things go off the rails. There's some weird stuff in JavaScript. I've grown over the years to appreciate JavaScript more, so I'll try to like keep my biases at bay. But this is weird stuff. Null is a primitive type. It's a primitive type with only one value, which is null. So null is a primitive type, and the only value a variable of type null can have is null. What's important about the null value and type is more of what it represents and how JavaScript programmers use it. We use null to represent, so it represents the concept of nothing. It represents the concept of empty. It represents the concept of unknown. Those are the words that you should have in your head when you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to assign this variable to null. Okay. It's not, this is the problem though. It's not like a reference to a non-existent object like in Java. It's not used that way. We deal with null with all the time in Java. And the value of null in Java is like my type is of type turtle or string or linked list. And null means like maybe in the future I'll refer to an object of that type, but right now there's no object. It's null. And we're used to checking for null like when we traverse our linked list, right? We'll write loops like while current.next is not equal to null, we keep iterating through our linked list. That's not how we use it in JavaScript. So we can do stuff like this. A equals null. And then this is odd. We're going to log the type of A. When you run this, it doesn't return null as the type. It returns object. I don't know why. No, I do know why. It's an old bug in JavaScript. So this is one of those things that like sometimes software's hard, right? And so sometimes you have a bug like the type of a variable of type null returns object, and you release it into the world and people use it. And then you can't change it. Like it's wrong, but you can't change it because there's thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of files out there that expect it, that already worked around the bug. And they expect the type of this variable to be object and not null. And if you were to change it, you're going to break all this code. So now forevermore, we are stuck that the type of a variable of type null is printed as object or is returned as object, not null. So there we go. It's fine. All right, last type that we care about. Undefined is a different type. Undefined is a primitive type with only one value, which is undefined. Here is where this shows up. It is undefined means it's the value of a variable that has not been explicitly assigned a value. So the undefined primitive type in JavaScript is similar to null being assigned to an instance variable in Java, right? If we declare our instance variables for a class and um, they're initialized to like a default value, and if they're like references to class types, then they're assigned the default value of null. That's like what undefined means in JavaScript. So this is a source of confusion because we're very used to null, but in JavaScript, null isn't used like null in Java. Instead, undefined is used that way. Um, yeah. So for example, if I say let C, but I'm not initializing it, I'm only declaring the variable C. And then if I say console.log C, we can see what its default value is. And if I do console.log type of C, we can see what type it is. So the value is undefined and the type is undefined. And so I think that's something that's a little bit confusing about JavaScript. The word null is both the type and a value, and the word undefined is both a type and a value. We'll get used to it. We'll get used to it. Just to kind of group stuff conceptually before we do a little bit of practice, we're gonna combine conditionals and Boolean expressions in JavaScript, along with the stuff we've already done here on primitive types and variables. We're gonna kind of put all of this together. Um, so we'll do a little bit more examples of conditionals and Boolean expressions. Um, you're going to see lots of similarities here. And again, I'm going to just focus on pointing out the key differences. So some if statements. Um, one thing that we need to be aware of is that all values have an implicit Boolean value due to JavaScript's type coercion. So any value can be interpreted as a Boolean value of true or false. So we can write code in JavaScript like that we can't write in Java because of this type coercion stuff. So we can say things like this. We can say if one and, so we use the same Boolean operators in JavaScript as we use in Java. So that's kind of cool. So one and hello, both one and hello will evaluate to true. So I can say console.log one and hello are true. That might seem a little weird, um, but I would say most of the time, the way that JavaScript interprets values as being true or false will make sense to us. One thing you might know is if you hit Control S on Windows or the Win S key on your Mac, when you save it, if you've installed the recommended extensions, it reformats the code automatically. And it does it in a slightly different style. So in APCSA, I, and Mr. Callahan always make sure our curly brackets align vertically because research shows that visual structure helps students understand code blocks better. Many people in the world and in a lot of like professional environments, their coding formatting conventions are not like that. Instead, the curly bracket goes on the previous line. So we're using like the default Google um, code formatting standards. So when you save your thing, you'll notice things get reformatted and the curly bracket moves up here. So that's a little bit of a change for us. But it's also nice that it cleans up all your indents and everything too. So I can write really sloppy indented code for whatever reason. Like I can do things like maybe that's over here and this is way over here and this is that. But when I hit save, it fixes all of it. So that's great. Again, if that's not working for you, you just need to install those recommended extensions. All right, let's look at some other, let's look at examples of values that are coerced to false. So I can say if 0 is false, or empty string, false, null, also false, undefined, also false. So 0, empty string, null, and undefined are not true. So if I add an else condition here, I can log that so we can see it. Console.log empty string, null, undefined are false. So that's what I mean. Like, it's odd, but like, I think it's intuitive, right? If you had to guess, I bet you would have said 0 would be false, empty string would be false, things like that. Another thing we can do in JavaScript is variables of different types are converted to numbers for comparison. So this is another like unique JavaScript thing. We can't do this type of thing in Java. So I can say if the string 34 equals 34, what JavaScript actually does in this case is that 34 is converted to the number 34 and then compared to 34. And that's why that will evaluate to true. I think that's useful. I get that. But it also can lead to some odd things because we can write code like this. If 3 is not equal to true, here's what happens that might be unexpected. So if we say if 3 is coerced to a Boolean value of true. Okay, it's not 0. I get that. But if we say 3 is not equal to true, the variables of now we have variables of different type. 3 is of type number, true is of type Boolean. The variables are all converted to type number. So we're going to convert true to a number. That's odd. True is converted to, anyone want to guess what number true gets converted to? Yeah, 1. True is converted to 1 and then compared to 3. I don't know about you, but like this is, hopefully you would never write code like this. But this is like unexpected to me because then like I'm like, oh, 3 is true. So like, yeah, true is not, true is equal to true. So that can't be correct. But what really happens is true is converted to a number and then compared. That's strange. All right. Sometimes this behavior here of like variables of different types being converted and compared is what we want. But there's other times where like, yeah, no, I want to know, is this thing without the types? Like I want to make sure it's the same type and has the same value. And so there's a different operator in JavaScript that lets us do this. It's called the strict equality operator. And it's 3 equal signs, and it does not perform type conversion. And a warning that you will get from our coercion, a warning that you're going to get from our linter is often going to be to encourage you to use the strict equality operator as opposed to the regular equality operator to make sure you're actually comparing what you intend to compare. This strict equality operator returns false if the types are different. So before it even looks at the values, it checks the types. If the types aren't the same, false. Honestly, this is actually most similar to Java's equality operator with two equal signs, because that's how Java's works too in general. We will, so my recommendation, not my recommendation, the best practice is to use this operator instead of the equality operator in JavaScript. And like I said, our linter is going to encourage you to do that as well. So now if I say if the string 34 is triple equal to 34, they are not equal because they are, wow, they are different types. And we can capture that in our notes here. 34 is not strictly equal to 34 because they are different types. Another thing I like about the auto formatter is when I hit save, it automatically like rewraps lines. See how it did it with like the open and close parentheses here? I can just type a really long line of code, save the file, it reformats it. Love it. My personal like coding style is not just like this one, but this is so convenient, like I can deal with it. So if you're like, I kind of like it a little different, hopefully like me, you'll get over that. Or if you care, like you can customize the formatting to your heart's content. So, all right, last concept here with ifs. All right, so a recommendation here for null and undefined. Recommendation regarding null and undefined. This is like you don't shoot yourself in the foot. Only use the strict equality and inequality operators. We've been focused on equality, like the triple equals. There's also a not double equals, which is strictly not equal to. Comparison and the equality operator. Comparison like less than greater than stuff. The equality operator meaning just two equal signs. They will most likely return unexpected results. So just a warning. So what do I mean by this? If we want to check if something is null, we're going to say if a triple equals null, console.log a is null. This is going to behave just like we expect. Similarly, we can say if C triple equals undefined, we can log that C is undefined. Yeah.